TheFreeRotation Nation, and welcome to another week's episode of us talking. I'm so bad at this.
Hi, we speak words in
Or
English.
as Chris says, hey y'all.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all. Hey.
I'm joined by Becky's here.
Woo, we're off to a strong start today. Keep your pimp hand strong.
Woo! And Chris.
Hola.
You didn't even say hi.
Hello.
So rude.
Hello.
One of the things we were thinking about, though, is how there have been a lot of updates to our true crime stories. It's like we report on them and they get solved. I'm not saying that we're crime solving, but I'm saying that we have a podcast episode and things get solved.
Let us say we do the least amount of work and suddenly it all gets solved.
So what happened is we got followed by the FBI on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm like, shit, these guys are onto something.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, here we are.
The best part, though, is the FBI only had 34 followers.
Well,
That was it.
It's the FBI. No one.
I mean, who's following the FBI?
True, I guess.
I mean, I do, but...
yeah.
It's like the NSA and the CIA are their only followers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Eye of Sauron. You don't want to follow them and bring its attention to you. Who followed me? Well, we're going to focus on 5 true crime stories that we followed. I'm get,
Five
five of them that we had a podcast on, and they've had resolutions. It's
Therefore, we are the best.
I mean,
Every other true crime podcast ain't matched up to us, homies.
They suck big old donkey dicks compared to
Y'all
us.
may make hundreds of thousands of viewers, but we solve crime.
yes, and predict things.
Right, because we're psychic.
The first one we're going to talk about.
These bitches be crazy.
Speaking of crazy,
Speaking of crazy, the Delphi murders. Not a good segue, but, there's been some updates in the murder of Libby and Abby.
Just these two names.
We don't do last names here.
and just as a reminder, that was
Becky
during-
does out loud constantly.
that's why I've changed.
Her own, yours,
Addresses.
theirs. Yeah.
Listen, this is the one where we talked about the Rainbow Girl murders and the Delphi murders, and this is like 2 years ago.
I say, refresh me on Libby and Abby. What was their whole scenario?
So they were the 2 girls who had a free day from school and chose to walk down the trails.
And then that was like that big, what was it called? It was a big viral picture where there you saw people like this guy walking behind them.
And then she gets a Snapchat video of him where he's telling them go down the hill. And so, we know exactly what the guy looked like who did, all these terrible things. Also, to preface this, when we first released this podcast, we got a lot of shit on YouTube about we needed to check our facts, get our stories straight. And at the time, I didn't want to confess that I went on the dark web and pulled details from there. And, I got called a liar and need to check my facts. But now the facts that I pulled from the dark web are known.
So check your facts, asshole.
Suck it, bitch.
Suck it, you 4 people that said bad things. Actually, it probably was more than that.
Why don't you do your research the way I did?
Illegally. No, I'm just kidding.
I went on the deep web.
You went on the deep web. Well, yeah. Okay, you went on the
I went on
deep
the
web.
legal one.
You went on the deep web. You didn't go on the dark web.
So technically, neither one are illegal. It's just what you do there that can be construed as illegal.
And I like to go and look at the true crime files.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I like to see the details. For instance, in the podcast, previously I talked about where they were found near water and staged. And that was one of the things I was pointing out. No, they weren't. But yes, they were. That was like a big point of contention is that. But now, here we are. But we want to go further into detail. So, but Becky, would you like to just summarize briefly the Delphi murders?
Oh, okay. So this was, and I'll be honest with you guys, I don't remember it as clearly as when we did the podcast episode, but the big deal about this was that no information was being released. It was actually one of the few times that law enforcement did not release any information other than the videos that was the Snapchat video and then the picture of the guy, because they were trying to find information about who these people were at the time. However, the murders, they happened in an area where it was prevalent for hiking. And these kids, like Angie said, these 2 girls had been walking, and it was a day after they had gone shopping and stuff like that. But what was really resounding about this case specifically is that nothing was released whatsoever up until they released the information regarding the suspect they actually apprehended. And it took years. I mean, it was, we did that podcast episode, I think, during COVID. Mm-hmm. And so now it's been almost 2 years, 3 years later, and they finally have released all details regarding it. So,
right.
And the murders happened 2018, 2019?
Yeah, it was like it was a couple of years prior to that. Yeah.
I wondered why they suddenly, were why it arose from the ashes, so to speak. What caused this true crime renaissance? So the sheriff's office says that they never stopped looking, but we know that that's not quite true.
Then they may have had just a guy on the case. It's just like there's no new information.
Well, in 2022, they had one of the deputies from the sheriff's department quit and sued the sheriff's office, stating that he felt that they were sitting on these crimes. This wouldn't be in the main one because he had a couple of leads. He kept trying to push the case, but it was like, we'll get to that eventually. We'll get to that. So, and then there was also a sheriff's election that was coming up. A very, very...
contested?
Yes, that's the word. I was thinking fraught with strife, but contested
I like
works.
Fraught with strife, though. That's a better way of talking about what happened.
So suddenly there was a push to get these things resolved again because you've got a guy suing you saying, something's wrong here. And then the GBI starts getting more involved again. So they released that they did have someone that they wanted to speak to named Richard Allen.
Did you say the GBI or the FBI?
GBI. FBI.
It would have to be
I swear they said GBI.
What state was it again?
I don't remember.
I was about to say, it's probably their State Bureau of Investigation was probably involved.
GBI, but yeah. I know the FBI was... I've written it further down in here. They say that, you know what? We do actually have someone when we were reviewing the notes. There's the guy that at the time said, I was on the trails. I saw some girls, and he spoke to a conservation officer, which think like your park ranger, and told him that, that he was out there. Suddenly they want to speak to this guy. And so on October 26, 2022, Richard Allen voluntarily went to the Indiana State... It's in Indiana.
IBI. It's like irritable bowel syndrome, but even worse.
Irritable bowel idiot.
I don't know if it's worse.
And he went there to speak to authorities. He was unable to explain a bullet from a gun he owned that he admitted he never allowed anyone to use or borrow. It was only himself. But they said, there was a bullet found between the two girls. An unspent bullet, but it had the markings of his P90. Like, it was a very kind of a unique gun. So they're like...
So are they saying, like, it jammed and he ejected it and it just...
That's what the, part of the story that the FBI put together is that he was probably threatening the girls. And like, I'll shoot you, and then it jammed, and he jacked the bullet out as he cocked it to threaten them.
Because that's the only way it would have, other than the magazine,
right?
Any markings from inside the
or
magazine.
Or if he had any sort of loose bullet he may have had on him. But I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, but even if it's a loose bullet, it wouldn't have the markings from the gun.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's in the magazine, unless it's jacked into the chamber,
it's
not going to have anything on it.
Well, so when they arrested him, they did release a few new pieces of evidence, although they still, a judge, where she kiboshes, like... any sort of media coverage.
They restricted any information.
There's a word for it.
It was restricted. I mean, it's confidential information. It can be released. It's restricted. We normally call it.
No, it was like it's usually public knowledge, but the judge basically sequestered the knowledge. I'll think of the word in a minute. But other new pieces of evidence were released once the police had their guy.
So he had it like sealed.
Yeah. Because they don't want to interfere, because the police said there's actually somebody else we're looking at. We think it was two people, not just him. So... they
didn't want to scare him off or give him any tips, which
makes
sense.
I think it was Libby's mom. One of the girls' moms stepped forward and said, guys, we've waited 5 years. You can wait 7 months for the trial.
Yeah.
Like, let's not ruin this case because you want to know all the details that they're keeping under wraps.
They'd much rather bring the perpetrators to justice than have quick information that may be right.
Right. And to be fair, we're not entitled to that information.
No.
That's not for us. So the other piece of evidence were released, and, like we're all familiar with the man in a coat and jeans approaching the girls saying, in the video saying, go downhill. But what he actually says... They released the full video. It's not the only piece of the video.
Yeah,
there was
a
link to the video.
Just randomly, if you've ever seen it.
And she actually shows him walking up on him, and she and her friend are talking about the man and how, he's been following them. And then he says, guys, go down the hill. So he actually addresses them. Like, there's no mistake that this is the guy.
Yeah.
And the affidavit reveals one of the girls mentions a gun. So while he's following them, she mentions he's got a gun. They still haven't released the video, just details of it. And then he says, guys, go down the hill. And then the girl starts, and then it shows them actually start walking down the hill. So we know for a fact this guy was directing this conversation to them. They identified he had a gun, and they start walking down the hill when he says the question. Now, Richard Allen, in the interview with the police, tells them that he saw 3 girls who did verify that they saw him, and he was very grumpy and looked scary. But when you're being questioned, did you see this murderer on the trails that day? Yeah, he was very scary.
Yeah. And people's memories are dog shit anyways.
Right. Well, and he's the one who originally went to police and said, hey, I was out on these trails. I go almost every single day.
Well, I was going to say, and hindsight's a little bit skewed. They always talk about witness, witness memory being a lot different. Like when somebody's been murdered at that area and you think that may be a suspect, they probably look a lot more scary. You
suddenly start filling in the blanks. Like I knew Chris was coming to the house today. Somebody walked by. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that looks like Chris's shoulders and walk. It wasn't. It was a little old lady. Like just... to put in perspective.
If it makes you feel better, I don't look like a little old lady.
He does not. But in my mind, because I was expecting to see that, that's what I saw.
Right.
And then Becky's like, that's not Chris. That's a little old lady.
That lady has a cane. I don't think Chris is carrying a cane.
Well, if you're a hunter and you're listening to this, you've seen it before with you get what's called tunnel vision when you're hunting. Mm-hmm. Squirrels can run by and you just think it's a deer.
There's a Stephen King book about this where the hunter expects to see a deer.
Yeah.
And he swears all throughout the book, like, I saw a deer. I did.
Well, you expand it to true crime. A lot of times, if you ever have these cases where you think that it turns out that somebody is innocent and they're not guilty, a lot of times the police investigation tunneled so hard on that person, all other evidence was sort of left out.
It gets skewed.
Yeah, you just think to yourself, okay, this declares it this. Even if there's an exculpatory piece of evidence that says, okay, that definitely cannot be that guy. Mm-hmm. But when you tunnel vision on it, it's the same circumstance.
Yeah, yeah. So here's what we know. Allen admits to being in roughly the same area as the girls. Witnesses saw him pretty much in the same clothing as consistent, although there are some... It doesn't fit perfectly, but it's close enough. And I'm thinking, is close enough really what we're going for here?
Yeah.
And then after the crime, there was a woman who saw a muddy and bloody man walking near the crime scene. So... when this was released, now we have another piece of evidence that we didn't have before. We still don't know how the girls died.
Right.
But in the FBI file that was released, it says that due to the massive amounts of blood at the crime scene, whoever did it didn't walk away not unbloodied.
Right.
And then it mentioned that their bodies were full of wounds created by it looks like serrated knife. And of course, they weren't shot. They did say they weren't shot, so now, the only thing we have is, and again, they were stabbed.
They never released how they were killed, so I assume they were strangled.
Right.
I thought he choked them to death.
Yeah, and it said that there's no defensive wounds on them, which is why I think the police think someone else was there.
Holding them down.
Holding one down, yeah.
Right, or maybe one's tied up, one's being held down while she's being stabbed, but basically it's way more heinous than we thought.
Right.
And it was muddy because it did come out that their clothes and the actual murder scene was by a creek. So their clothes were found under the bridge. So now we know they were naked, which, implies something even worse. Yep. And then they said that where they found the bodies were found was not where they were killed. So now we know they were moved and staged.
Drug.
Yeah, bitch. Suck that on our first one.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted... that's not what I'm saying. I'm right about a crime. It's that,
Well, and the thing is, at the time we were talking about it, we knew that we were going to put some information out there that may be contentious because there wasn't a lot of information. But, we both have... I think this was when it was just me and Angie doing an episode. And both of us have jobs that resolve in us having concrete evidence before we go forward on stuff. We're not just going to make shit up because we need the likes and follows and subscribe to us. Okay, if we quit this podcast today, we would be perfectly fine.
Right.
We wouldn't make stuff up just because we wanted listeners.
So there were two main, speaking of tunnel vision, there were two main people that police had their sights on. One was a guy, I think his name was Tom Logan, whose land the girls were murdered on, and he was had been arrested for extreme violence towards women and girls. And if you see a picture of him, he just looks the part. And he has no compunction, And I'm thinking that they think that this guy helped, or they think that it was two strangers. One of them walked up on the guy committing the crime, was like, "Hey, can I help?"
God.
Can you imagine?
Hoping that somebody's coming to help you, and then it's like, oh, I like to stab people as well.
Unfortunately, this guy died from complications of COVID-19, so we may never know.
Oh, fuck that. Shit.
That's also a weird, like, that's a pretty far jump, like, in my mind, that some rando walks up and is like, oh, this other complete stranger is going to help me murder and rape these women.
Yeah.
This should be completely fine. Why would I worry about it at all? Like, that just, that seems like a pretty
it's
far
probably
out
that they
there
just don't have
theory.
any information how they connect to the two of them, but one of them
Right.
is dead. What do you expect?
Well,
What?
yeah, and it may have been just random. Like, this
It-
may
like,
have
they
just
just-
happened on his property, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
it's near where the hiking trails are.
The other suspect that they were looking at was a guy named Keegan Klein. And I think you mentioned him in the first one. He was the child predator, pedophile, who actually they released that he had been in touch, I think, with Abby. And Snapchatting with her, and they had planned to meet that day. That's why she and Libby were actually out there on that bridge, because that's where he had set to meet them. Well, he tells police, "Oh, I never actually made it there." So,
And I wonder if there's not like some weird. So that makes more sense to me than just some rando walked up was like, "I'd love to help you rape and murder these children."
yeah,
Like that.
yeah,
Meh. Like that seems like he could have had some sort of contact with the Allen gentleman.
yeah.
Like via dark web, via deep web, via some sort of messaging app
Yeah.
where they had this set up. Like
Right.
that makes more sense.
And it does seem like there's some connections between him and Alan and him and Logan. So those three men appear to be connected through this Keegan Klein guy. However, was actually arrested in Florida, and then they ended up dismissing like 24 charges against him. But he admits that, yeah, I'm a child predator, but I maybe didn't do this. Like, and that's the other thing, is there's no true definitive he didn't do this.
They just don't have enough evidence to push
Right.
forward that he did.
Right. And then with Richard Allen, and he does look just like this guy in the video. The way he walks, the sound of his voice matches. That's how they ruled out Keegan Klein, by the way, is his voice and his build and how he walks. Doesn't look like this dude at all. The one in the video.
Yeah.
Whereas Richard Allen does. But Allen says, he's a manager at CVS. He's pharmacy tech. And he's never been in trouble, never been arrested. He actually called, when they found the girl's body, and said, "Hey, I was out there. Maybe I saw something." Well, they were asking about the girls, and he said, I saw 3 girls. I could tell you where I saw them on the trails, and it was close to them. There's also some stuff where people are like, this seems really funny that they suddenly have this guy, when they're being sued and under scrutiny, and there's a contested sheriff's race where,
But you wonder how much, especially during like a contested sheriff's race, how much more of the sheriff's office he's pushing towards solving these cases, because it looks good if you're trying to be the sheriff that you solved an unsolved murder.
right.
Like you wonder how much more of their abilities and their resources they're pushing towards this.
Right. That's what I was thinking. They probably are hyper-focused because of the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Well, Richard Allen's attorneys pointed out, too, that the police were looking for a specific car, like a smart car, a PT Cruiser, and he drove a Ford Focus. But from a distance and overhead, those cars look very similar. Like, you didn't do yourself any favors by saying he drives a Ford Focus, not a PT Cruiser, or smart car.
Well,
They
even
kind of
so-
have a similar build.
Well, even so, they're just looking for a car because they think it might be the one. That's not a smoking gun that says he did it. Mm-hmm. It's just we saw this in the area.
Yeah.
What's up?
Well, and his lawyers want to get a hold of, like, his discussion with the conservation officer, because they're like, he didn't even speak to a sheriff 5 years ago. He spoke to a park ranger. And so, they want to see the notes and, like, why was he never followed up with? He didn't hear from them for 5 years. And then I was thinking, of course, I was thinking about this last night, about what we talk about today, and I was like, a bullet was found between where the 2 girls were found. They said the bodies were moved.
True.
So why would a bullet be there?
Again, he may have just jacked one in there. It may have got jammed or something.
Yeah, and
He may have had, again, if you're not...
or it could have been in his clothes and caught in his jacket and fell out.
Well, then it wouldn't have the markings of the gun. But if you're not,
No, if
Like,
it-
imagine he
like,
ejected it
he
and it
ejected
got.
it and it got stuck somewhere on him.
well, I'm wondering if if you're not used to carrying a gun, he may have had when he loaded it. Some guns will just put one in the chamber, and he may have been trying to cock it to scare them. And there's already one in there, so it ejects whatever's in there and just reloads.
Right.
So they may have just found that one.
That's what they're saying. So it's just something to think about. I don't want to crucify this guy, but when you look at this video and you in the picture that they put out in the sky, and he had a thing where he would pose in front of the wanted posters for this guy. Like, have you seen this man? And he would take all these pictures under them. Something else that the FBI released is that there were souvenirs taken from one of the girls.
Right.
Somebody took something.
Well, if they stripped them naked, they could have took something out of their purse, something from a wallet,
Right, a necklace.
Jewelry,
Or a ring, something.
a nipple since he already had a knife.
I mean, it could be. It just said
we
a
don't know.
souvenir. Yeah. So that's where we are. I mean, we don't have a definitive resolution, but we're pretty sure. He was arraigned in January. And
We'll see when the trial is.
they said June.
Yeah. So
But-
that'll be when all the true information
Yep.
comes out.
When
That's
everything
why
starts
she was
hitting.
like, just wait 6 more months or 7 more months. So, Chris, I believe you did the episode on the Canada mass children's graves.
Did I?
Or maybe I did. One of us did.
I remember talking about it. I don't think I did it.
We did a
Yeah.
great job remembering the episodes we do.
Yeah. Well, we discuss these things as a team.
Yeah.
Well, there's been some updates.
And fuck the Canadians. I mean, what?
Yeah. Seriously.
No, and the indigenous ones too. All of them.
Oh, wow.
If you're America's hat, you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
kidding, Canucks.
Go put yourself on a hook. A hat hook. Well, we've had some more news come forward in this one. More mass graves have been found.
Yeah, but everyone was pretty sure that was going to happen since this has been going on for 120 years, basically.
Yeah. And the thing is it's so much now, they've kind of stopped reporting on it. But even just in January, there was some found in February, but I didn't have a solid number yet. But they're still being found in Canada in January 2023, 171, pretty much, plausible graves. They're not quite sure how many or how less there are, maybe more, were found at St. Mary's Indian Reservation School. I meant residential school. Let me try that again. 171 plausible graves were found in St. Mary's Indian Residential School in Kenora, Ontario. So, I mean, just to refresh our memories, that this was an education system for Indigenous children that ran to the 1900s. I think it was started in the late 1880s, 1903-ish.
It went into, 1980s, 1990s?
Yeah. It included
90s?
about 130 largely church-run schools. Shocker. It took Indigenous children from communities, sometimes by force, and put them in these schools and stopped them from using their languages and wouldn't allow them to have anything to do with their culture at all. Completely whitewashed them.
Yeah, they're basically trying to, and this is air quotes, people, civilize them.
Yes.
And that's really how they look at it. Like, they were civilizing the savages versus
Right.
they themselves being, monsters.
Yeah. And thousands are believed to have died from disease, neglect, malnutrition, accidents, fires, and violence. And more of the people who attended these schools are coming forward saying this was awful. We were just assigned numbers. Like, you'd be number 65 was one of the interviews I watched. And he said it was extreme, sexual abuse by the priests and the nuns. And, be like, number 65, and bend over and show your butthole. Like, that's just how it was, and they had to do it. A little graphic there, but
That's probably what happened.
yeah.
A little brown eye to start your day.
Yeah. So just an update on that. We don't want to forget these things. We don't want to forget these children
No, and I
who
think
died.
when we reported on it, they had found 21 that were confirmed, but they were expecting there to be a lot more.
A lot more. And just so you know that, yes, they have found these lot mores, and it's still going on.
Well, and I think they're talking it was going to take at least a couple of years for them to really gauge how many, because they could only do, what was it, like the ground censoring?
Yeah, they were doing either ground penetrating radar or LiDAR to try to see where it was. And you're talking, it takes time. And for LiDAR, it's like a crisscross helicopter pattern. So, and again, depending on how far away these schools are and how many actual vehicles, like helicopters, you have equipped with that actual technology, it's going to take a while. I mean,
And the money to hire them.
Yep.
And the availability, because
I mean, they're doing like LiDAR in the Amazon right now, and they've done like 5% over the past like 10 years. It just takes time. So again, with that, even with GPR, like ground penetrating radar, a lot of times that's on a machine that looks a lot like a lawnmower that you just slowly roll over the ground, and it basically like sonar echolocates back and forth to see where there's disturbances in the soil. If you're doing that by hand on these schools that are in Canada's a lot more vast than you might imagine,
Right.
especially when you get towards where the indigenous people are.
and it's not like they're opening up the back door and chucking kids in a hole.
Yeah.
Like they're putting it a good distance from the school.
If they bury them a mile from the school, if you don't know what direction that is, that's a lot of ground to cover.
Right. Now you're measuring in a circumference instead of,
Yeah, it's 2 miles in both directions.
Both directions, yeah.
And in a full circle, like that's a
That's a
lot of
lot.
ground.
yeah. Now you're doing an area instead of,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, the Pope has come forward and offered an apology on the church's behalf. I mean, it's nice that you did this, but
Well,
it does
again,
little to help.
You can't really, and it sucks. Like I don't know the Pope or whatever, but like, what else is he gonna do?
Yeah.
He's not like if he was physically there, he's just gonna be like, sorry, this happened under the church's watch. That's all he can do.
And it's one of those things that the rest of the world looks at like, these are your first world countries. Look how you treat people.
Yeah.
Don't come over here and judge us. So Canada, you lost your nice hat. Like, take your tag off your shirt.
Don't act like there's not scumbags because they say a boot,
Exactly.
because they are.
Yeah.
They allow the French to hang out. You know there's something wrong.
Yes. Yesterday on the Gordon Ramsay European trip show, he was like, I love France. I hate the French.
That sounds about right. France is beautiful, but it's populated by the French.
Yeah. Ruins it. The next one we have an updates on is Gabby Petito.
Oh, yeah, that was more recent. Moving toward the more recent stuff that's happened.
Yeah. So you want to briefly fill us a synopsis of Gabby Petito?
Okay, this one's a little bit easier to remember because it didn't happen like
Yeah.
Last year.
last year. But this was a pretty big news story. It was the Gabby Petito was one of these influencers who had a hashtag van life. She traveled all over the United States with her boyfriend. And she went missing, and nobody really knew what was going on. The only thing they knew is that the last person she had been with was her boyfriend, and that she had stopped at a restaurant near the Grand Teton National Forest, and that they had gotten into a pretty bad fight the day right before she went missing. And then people just didn't know where her family didn't know where she went. Her boyfriend was not giving out any information about her location.
And he had actually absconded into the swamp.
And he had gone on into the Florida swamp, and that was the last anybody had heard. And actually, I don't know if we ever talked about that part because I don't know if that had happened yet.
Yeah, I think it had just happened.
it was like-
so
yeah,
we did discuss how his parents. Well, we didn't know he had went there. It was.
I think when we talked about it, his parents had said that's where he said he was going, but no one
Yeah.
was sure.
Yeah.
Right. Because, we were talking about it right as it was going on.
Well,
So now there is an update.
turns out he did go into the swamp, and his parents did help him, along with the family lawyer that they had hired. So Gabby Petito's parents, on a branch from this, are suing his parents, and a judge allowed them to include the attorney for gross neglect. And so a judge allowed them, Gabby Petito's parents, to actually sue the family attorney as well for
Gross negligence.
gross negligence and gross misconduct of Brian Landry's parents and attorney, that is, Brian Landry. Because they state that the lawyer and the parents knew. So Gabby Petito's parents are suing Brian Landry's parents and the family attorney for them because they knew Gabby was dead. And instead of, not just even being quiet, they were like, hope she's found soon.
Right.
Good luck to you.
And gave him time to get away.
Exactly. And for the family attorney, it's gross negligence and abuse of
Well, that's how you get disbarred.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I don't know.
gross misconduct.
Well, there's also, you can possibly charge him with concealing the death of another.
Right, because he knew, and why make this statement?
And the issue you're going to be having with him is proving he knew.
Yeah.
It's hard to prove what someone knows.
Not the lawyer. I'm talking about the parents.
Oh yeah, they probably again. It's all this proving. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Proving they knew she was dead and didn't just say, "No, we helped our son go camping because he went camping
Well,
a lot."
the proving it won't be hard because he wrote about it in his journal.
That he had told them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that still doesn't technically mean they knew.
that had happened.
But it can harass them for a long time, and I do enjoy doing that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Oh,
too.
absolutely. No, fucking rain down
Yeah,
to
and
hell
it
on
is a
these people.
civil suit. It's nothing in the criminal. It's civil right now. But I think the judge saying, yeah, go ahead, sue that motherfucker too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not her exact words, but
Well, I was about to say, I don't know if we made it that far, but he did. If you did not know, he did commit suicide in the swamp.
so he went into the swamp and he's living there for a couple of days and he's writing in his journal, and he writes a confession about what happened to Gabby, and he says that they were, had parked and they were going on a hike. And as they're coming back, it starts raining, and like a big storm comes up. And they're trying to outrun the storm and get back to the vehicle. And as they're crossing a stream, she slips. And he said from behind him, he hears her cry out and then like a really meaty thud. And she's hurt. So he has a hard time getting her out of the creek because she's hurt herself so badly that every time he moves her, she's crying out in pain. He says she's hurt both of her legs. Her ankle, she can't breathe well, and she's hit her head. And as time goes on, the thing on their head gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So what he does is he tries to carry her back to the car, but he can't carry her. He's too weak. It's freezing at this point. They're both soaking wet. The rain has gotten them. So he's like, you know what, I'll just build us a fire. He can't get a fire going. So he goes down a little bit more. Yeah. And he builds a fire and he lays her in front of it, and this entire time she's crying out in pain and she's like, please just end it. So he says he goes into shock at this point because they're so cold, and she's getting worse and worse, and he can't make her comfortable. So he decides he'll do the right thing and gracefully end her life. He will be merciful, and he...
At what point did he call 911?
I was going to say, at what point do you just not leave her there, go get help, and come back?
Also, what part of sliding into, like, falling down and then sliding into a creek equals...
Yeah.
Breaking every bone in your body, a contusion on your head.
And that I must mercifully end your life.
Being conscious enough to be like, I want you to kill me, but not conscious enough to move.
Exactly.
Not being like, I can't... Could you just call an ambulance? I know our phone works because I post on YouTube every goddamn day.
Right.
And you can't carry me. Just leave me. Go get help.
And he said, he was afraid that by the time he got back to the car or at a place where he could get signal, she would have already been dead.
Yeah, you could tell by the way he tried to start a fucking fire.
Yeah. Seriously. And so...
he's just trying to justify everything and make it look like he's not awful.
And he said, with the bump on her head getting worse and worse.
It's a contusion.
Yeah. He didn't know what was wrong with her chest. Like, she was breathing funny, really shallow breaths. I'm like, she maybe punctured, like, broke a rib or something.
How far was this canyon she fell into that broke ribs and punctured lungs and
legs?
legs?
I'm thinking, you said a creek.
Yeah.
That's like barely running. Creeks aren't deep at all.
And I'm still confused. Why couldn't you just make her comfortable and go get help?
Because this is all bullshit.
Yep.
This is all bullshit.
We know how she got the contusion, bitch. You hit her.
Yeah, probably with the butt of the gun.
Yeah. So he strangles her mercifully. And I'm like, that is excessive.
That's an aggressive way to do it.
You are looking in somebody's face as you... Yeah.
Ooh, sorry about this.
And it takes time to strangle somebody.
As someone who has choked a lot of girls, you really got to put effort in to make them go unconscious. It is rough. They can take a lot, so this is bullshit.
Exactly. He's talking,
not to death.
He's talking of a sexual nature, I'm sure.
I know, I'm just...
They don't even pass out. You choke shit out of them.
It's true. You have to put a lot of pressure in the exact right place to strangle someone to death. And in the meantime,
They have the world's gushiest orgasms. It's weird.
Okay.
I mean, that's medical science. Like, that's
just science?
That's just a fact.
That's just a fact.
I wish you could see
but
my
for
face
her,
go back and forth looking at the two of you.
I mean, I don't think she laid there like, kumbaya and
Please choke me to death.
Or
choke me like you hate me.
Choke me like you hate me, but you love me.
So then he shot himself in the head. And when they finally found him, he was there with his journal wrapped in a waterproof thing.
Bag, yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever been kayaking, it was in one of those bags.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were complaining that it took the cops so long to find him when they knew kind of the area he was in.
Yeah.
But if you've ever been down to like Apalachicola and those areas, it is fucking thick.
Let's say
Yeah.
it's swampy.
Impossible.
We could
to
be
get
20
through.
feet apart, and I
You'd
may not
never
know
see
you're
'em.
there.
It is, and I mean, it is sawgrass and yucca plants and tall trees, and it is, you can't walk through it. If it's
Right.
not carved out with a tractor, you're not walking through that shit.
Yeah.
It is thick.
I think I was talked about that at the time. Wasn't it like really rainy?
It had flooded the area they thought it was in, so they couldn't even get cars back
right.
there.
That was the
which
big thing, is why it took so long. As
most
well.
of these areas, especially in the, like, and I think he was near Apalachicola, like that state park area, which is a couple 100,000 acres. Most of the roads cut through there are gravel and dirt. They're not paved, and they are miles and miles and miles long. We go camping down there, and you can take a day and just drive all the dirt roads
Yeah.
and never see another human being. Not one. And you're just out there from sun up to sundown, and it's
Yeah.
cool, and it's fun, and it's pretty.
And there may very well have been somebody just on the other side of the bush.
You never
You wouldn't know.
It is fucking thick. It's just, people don't understand when they think swamp, they think like the Okefenokee or like high water, few
Yeah.
trees. This is not that. This
No.
is high grass, high plants, and thick
Yeah.
that they control burn every couple of years because it is so thick that if you don't, it'll take over. It is
Right.
bananas crazy.
And then all through there, you also can't just whack-a-mole at it with a machete, which you can, but there's also things.
You're also gonna be out there for years whack-a-moleing it
Yeah.
with a machete.
There's things. These things are thick. They're you
They're
know,
spiny. They're thick. They are in abundance. It's hard to explain to people, but it's, imagine waist tall grass, but it has thorns all over it, and it's 2 inches thick, and it's everywhere.
yeah.
Everywhere. It is. You can't get through it.
And as you hack them, they release like this juicy liquid stuff that, if it gets on me, I find it particularly itchy.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's not a thing where it's not a park. This isn't picnic table set up where you can see everywhere.
Right.
It is roads cut through the most dense foliage you can imagine, and you're looking for one person that's somewhere in the foliage.
Who's not making any sound because
Yeah.
they're dead.
Well, that, and even when he was alive,
Yeah.
if you just sit there quietly, they will never find you.
No.
Never.
Yeah.
We had, the last time we were camping, we had 3 panther within 30 yards of our campsite, and we only saw them because we were driving at night and saw them just kind
The
of
eye shine.
dip into the thickness, and you're like, huh, they can murder us real quick. And
Yeah.
if they drug us into that, if they drug me into that, you would never find me. There's just no way.
Yeah.
So looking for someone who's specifically hiding in that stuff, I'm amazed they found his body at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the part that surprised me. It's not that they found him; it's that it is really
Right.
that they
And
found
they probably only did because the family said they
him. We knew what area within
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
5 square.
because they were used. That's where they always went.
Yeah.
It's like he's going to be in one of these areas.
But
But
even-
that's probably the only way.
And it still took them a while to find him.
Mm-hmm.
People underestimate how dense the swamp is down there, and it's not like this high water swamp you're thinking of. You can get in a boat and just cruise around everywhere.
No, you're trekking through it,
Yeah, and it's a nightmare.
and you're putting on waders, and if you're smart,
Yeah, I mean you have to,
Yeah.
and even then, I don't know how if he went into the dense brush, you're not pulling him out of there. I just
Mm-hmm.
can't imagine it.
yeah. So that's where we are now. He confessed that he did kill her. I mean,
We all knew.
I don't think anybody believes his story of
No.
why.
Again, he tried to. Again, if it was his last thing on Earth, you don't want to go out a villain.
Yeah.
You want to make
Mm-hmm.
it seem like you're kind of not a hero, but at least a justifiable, sympathetic.
Yeah, but none of your
Honest-
story makes no fucking sense,
Yeah.
dude.
Honestly,
again,
she probably fell in the creek, and it pissed him off, and just
she may have
triggered him.
She may not even fell in the creek. She may have just tripped and slowed him down or grabbed him or
That's
something.
it.
Like,
And
Or-
he got pissed off and beat the shit out of her and then strangled her
Well, I
out
was
of
about
anger.
to say, or he pushed her down into it and she got hurt.
Yeah, you had said
Yeah.
that maybe he pushed down, she got hurt.
And that was
Because,
it.
again,
you know, and he said that he couldn't possibly,
And you can
you
see
know,
the
go
vid-
on without her.
you can see the video from the day before. Was it the day before where the cops pulled
Yeah.
him over?
Yeah.
Like literally one day before he kills her,
Mm-hmm.
because people called and complained because they were fighting
In a Mexican
at
restaurant
a
of all
restaurant.
things.
Yeah, and then even the domestic violence witness on the road, where they completely ignored her,
Yep.
and she has a contusion on her cheek. Remember, the cop said, well, she didn't really have any visible signs, but she posted it herself,
Yeah.
sitting in the car crying, asking for help, and she has a huge contusion on her face, which I think is what he's trying to perpetrate. She got when she
hurt herself.
Hurt herself in the creek.
Yeah.
And he mercifully ended her life.
Again, if you... Growing up with hunters, if there's a wounded animal and you put it out of its misery, you don't feel bad about that. Like, that really is an act of kindness if something is hurt to the beyond repair. If there's a turtle and it's been run over in the road and its shell's cracked like across the back, but it's still alive, there is no repairing that. It can never walk again. It can never move again. That's basically like it snapped your spine in half. They can't repair it. If you have to put it down, it sucks when you do it, but it's better for that turtle. I'm not saying people are like turtles, but I don't feel like I want to kill myself because I had to put an animal down. Like,
right.
What?
Yeah.
And I don't hide it from anybody. If anybody questions me, I'm like, yeah, he was dead.
Well,
he was in a lot of pain.
Well, I was going to say, there's a lot of that story that just doesn't make sense all the which way you want to read it.
Yeah, none of it.
Yeah, so it was probably him just trying to justify what he did to
Absolutely.
make himself sound like he was sympathetic. But at the end of the day, most people, if this had been like a situation with any of us involved and somebody had fallen and hurt themselves, one of us would have gone to get help.
Call 911.
Yeah.
My first thought is like, if I'm walking with my wife and she gets hurt, my first thought isn't choke her to death.
Yeah.
Call 911.
Well, and he said that putting her over his shoulder because he couldn't,
Yeah, he was a little dude.
And it hurt her too badly to throw her over his shoulder.
I bet it hurts a lot less than death.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, like, okay, and you try and carry her out and something happens,
Military dudes get blown up with grenades and they'll drag their, partners out with one leg, one arm. Mm-hmm. You don't choke them out.
Yeah.
That is not the response.
Go to sleep.
Yeah. You do everything you can to save that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not your call.
Weird.
Well, it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if my wife hurt herself, I'm just not going to choke her to death.
I would get somewhere if I didn't have cell signal. I'd get somewhere, call 911, say where I'm at. They have rescue people for this purpose. You're not in like the middle of bumfuck Egypt nowhere. You are in the national forest.
But he apparently was able to drag her out of the creek.
And a good bit away.
Yeah. Like, what? None of this makes any kind of sense, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy.
And his family. And their lawyer.
And their lawyer.
Fuck all y'all.
Fuck all y'all
Today's
bitches.
episode is just fuck all y'all.
Fuck y'all.
The next one is the Somerton Man. So
Hey.
we know who he is.
Yep, we found that out.
We know where he comes
2
from.
weeks after you did that
I
episode.
know.
Yeah, I'm telling y'all.
I'm telling you, we do the least amount of effort for the most amount of gain. Don't
so
work
Chris,
hard.
you want to briefly go over what Somerton is?
Somerton Man was basically, he was a gentleman that was found on Somerton Beach in Australia. He was found with, basically, they found his body. He was laid out on, like, up against a beach wall. It's not like a retaining wall for, like, water or anything. It's just like a wall they had up. He was dead. He had a suit on. All the tags have been cut out of all his clothing. There was no fingerprints, no license, no nothing. The only thing they found on him, and they found it later, was a folded up piece of paper that was from a book of poetry from the 1400s, I think.
The Rubaiyat.
Yeah, and it was the last sentence from the Rubaiyat that had been written down, or actually cut out of that specific book. So it was this weird, like, people thought maybe he was a spy, or he was a Nazi that was on the run, because this is all there in I think it was 41, maybe?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been this huge mystery for, 80 years as to who this dude was that showed up with no money, no license, no identification.
And then your dulcet tones brings it alight, and suddenly.
No way to track who he was, where he came from. They're pretty sure he came in on a train. They were pretty sure they found a piece of luggage that he had left on the train, but there was no way to 100% prove it was ever his. They're just, somebody saw him with it, they thought. And that was kind of it. Just this weird that no one knew how he died. He was just dead.
He was just dead.
No gunshots, no strangulation, just leaned up against the wall and called it quits.
He done dead it.
Well, based on, there was a police interview with a woman who went white as a ghost when she saw him. So it made some people think that her son Robin was his.
And she was a nurse, I think.
Yeah. In the war, probably the thinking is maybe she met him as a spy. Then they had an illicit affair, and so a professor at the University of Adelaide named Derek Abbott wanted to find the identity of the Somerton man. So he looks up Robin's daughter, and they actually decided to get married right away after meeting. But he didn't give up his search to, find out who the Somerton man is. And because there was DNA and hairs left and a mask, a funeral mask they had made. So they found out that the Somerton man is named Carl Webb. And they traced him back to his direct line of ancestry. And when they went to his family, they're like, oh, yeah, here's pictures of him. This is definitely him.
The guy.
That's him. So, and Derek Abbott, he had teamed up with a U.S. forensic expert, Colleen Fitzpatrick, I think it's Colleen Fitzpatrick, who specializes in cold cases. And they used living relatives to, like I said, 100% identify him. So Carl Webb was born in 1905. He married Dorothy Robertson, and they'd separated. She moved down where he was found, around the Somerton area, so he had taken a train to go down and see her. I guess the thinking is maybe to see if they could reconcile.
Sure. Or strangle her to death.
I mean, you never know. He had a sister in Melbourne married to a Thomas Keene, whose initials were found on in his clothes because it was TK. And it was like pass-me-downs. And here's the thing, and you had said this in our podcast, is there were a lot of GIs in Melbourne at the time and in the area, and they sold their clothes and their shoes because they were quality made, which is how he came to have this GI clothing with TK sewn in it because it was like hand-me-down. And he was probably staying with his sister in the area at the time. But his wife, Dorothy Robertson, said that he was obsessed with killing himself and death. And he always carried a copy of the Rubaiyat because it was poetry about death and dying. So now they think, and there's no definitive proof of this, we'll never know, but that when he found her, he decided, you know what, I just actually just want to go ahead and die, because she said all of his poetry and all of his stories was about killing himself.
Yeah, so maybe she just didn't want to reconcile because he's a gothic motherfucker.
Yeah,
She's like,
she said he was very violent, very dark, very abusive. She wouldn't have reconciled with him anyway.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he may have tried to reconcile, and she was like, nah.
Yeah.
What's weird against this whole thing is this was huge news.
Yeah.
And if she's in the area, she's like, nope, never met that motherfucker.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, how would you not? You saw, because she's in the area. He died in Somerton, which was, I think was like a town or two away.
Yeah. I was going to say, just not her problem anymore.
And
not
his sister lived there.
Yeah, that's
in
what
the
I'm
Melbourne
saying.
area.
Nobody said a word. They were just like, nope, never heard of that dude.
I mean, sure, we didn't have like the news we have today, but newspapers, magazines, this was
huge.
Yeah. And his family. And they said, he just kind of, disappeared from their lives because that's just what he was like. I guess, to me, he probably was like a huge depressive, or maybe even, I don't want to say bipolar.
He may have been.
But he may have been, and he just...
But none of that explains them not coming forward after they post pictures of him in every paper.
Exactly.
Be like, nope, never heard of him.
Yeah.
Some mysteries we will never be able to solve. Mm-hmm. We can just only identify the guy, but that doesn't mean we know why,
That's what I thought was so
how.
sad, is he's so depressed, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to take my favorite line, like, what, this is the end, is what it says, and kill myself on the beach, looking out at the water, which I thought was so sad that, he sits on the wall so he can see the water and kills himself. And then his family still don't give a shit enough to say, oh, hey, that's, what was his name? Derek. That's Derek Abbott. That's Derek.
I thought it was Carl Webb.
That's Carl Webb.
See, they don't even know who it is.
That's what I'm saying. Derek Abbott was... I thought it sounded weird. I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Because Carl Webb just sounds like a guy who would be miserable.
Yeah. Hey, that's Carl. In the family pictures, he's smiling. Like, you can really... And you can tell, like, this is the dude. And that's why he looked similar to somebody else. It was like it could have been someone else, but it was his brother. So remember the GI that they're like, oh, it could have been him. That was his brother. So it was just... so weird. Like, the story was all around what it actually was.
They tracked back to, like, Ohio. He's like, I'm very much alive. What's up?
Exactly. So he's
but yet does not mention his brother may be missing.
Yeah, the guy that looks just like me. Haven't seen him in years.
Mm-hmm. I looked for updates on the Jean Benet DNA case. I didn't see anything really. So there's no real updates on this.
at this point, that's just going to probably remain a mystery until it's just not.
I saw something the other day about Jean Bonnet that was trying to link Epstein and Ghislaine to that case, and I was like, I'm not even getting into this right now.
That's a rabbit hole.
Oh,
that
but
you'll
I'm
never
going
get
to.
out.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna fly down it.
I saw that and I was like, son of a
with
bitch.
wings.
Like, imagine there's some connection.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna go read everything about that. But my top true crime update, and when I told Becky this, that was the reaction, was the Witch of Warwickshire.
The bitch in the tree?
No, the guy who had the scythe through him.
Oh, yeah.
That I did from
in the news.
Gee, this okay.
Recently,
I'm going to preface this first. This is not an actual update.
It is an actual update.
This is Angie's iteration of what she thinks an update would actually look like.
Okay.
Just wait
in
for
the
this.
news. So if you guys remember, the guy died. His scythe was found in his chest.
Yeah, lodged into him.
Yeah, and I had, perpetrated that. Maybe a cow rolled down a hill, tripped him, caused the scythe to fling up, and stabbed him. Just like that. Recently in the news, it's the exact thing that happened. A cow rolling down a hill caused someone to lose their footing, fall, and whatever they had in their hand, it fell on them and killed them. A cow. It has been noted in the news, cows falling down hills and killing people in their homes because they roll, crash through roofs, boom, you're dead. Like, if a cow falls on you, you're dead. So it is not out of the question that this cow who was found had fallen down the hill and landed, didn't take this guy out on the way down.
Becky's right. This isn't an update.
It's an update. It's an update.
I want this. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I would love for this to be really the resounding ending of this because
it is. This is my last big update.
No. For this story itself, 80 years later, people are not talking about it because they don't want people to know cows roll down hills. That's the big secret about Warwickshire.
I hope the real story is there's a slanty-eyed horse that did it, but he's trying to blame the cows. So he's like peeking from the back and like
Flicking his tail
like
over.
pointing at the cows.
Like a Lifetime version of a Disney movie involving animals.
Well, and you know what? I think my phone must have heard the podcast because it just here's these articles. I'm like, my God, cows and sheep fucking roll down the hills all the time in the UK. This isn't new.
This isn't
new news.
This isn't related. It just so
This
happened.
isn't moo-moos.
In other moves.
In other moos, Bessie rolled down the hill and took out a local farmer.
What I appreciate about this entire podcast is the way you're ending this podcast is with exactly how.
All I'm saying is we
always
have proof
start.
it happens now.
So what we have here is something that's completely unrelated to anything we've talked about before, but happened once.
I'm just surprised.
Completely the answer.
I'm just surprised.
Correlation is causation.
Well, I was about to say, I'm surprised you didn't try to relate it back to the aliens dropping a cow on top of the man because
I haven't gotten there yet, Becky.
Bigfoot chucked the cow at the man.
I do my research and only report what, is legitimate.
This isn't an update. I don't know if this counts as legitimate.
Yeah, this is our true crime update. Except this one, not so much.
True crime update number 17. Occasionally cows fall.
More to you.
Wait. Nope. Okay.
When you put it like that, sure, it doesn't sound as exciting, but when we look at could a cow have rolled down a hill and caused this, the answer is yes.
Here's the
it
thing.
probably did.
Yeah,
Because remember, a cow
I like
was
how we go
found in a
from
hole.
it could to probably did. This is most likely what happened.
It's the most likely-
100%.
Especially when you think about,
He definitely wasn't murdered.
they were going out later that day to get a cow who had fallen down the hill into a hole. Maybe it did nick him and...
Hey,
I hope it happened that way.
you know what? The aliens are coming back. I want it to happen
can ask
whichever
them.
way it happened.
I'm going to write later. Dear aliens.
Did y'all see where the Pentagon said that thing, the oblong or whatever it was,
the umu
was probably a UFO? You're like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the big thing. They were like, because they was they said
It was
5 years
picking
ago.
up speed.
Yeah, but they were like, it just may have minerals that we don't have on this earth.
Yeah.
But it just happens to travel and make lights.
It's melting ice that creates thrust.
And it
as
does
it
have
goes.
a moo
Like,
moo
well, it's
in
going
it.
farther
Not
from
a
the sun.
single
How's it
person
picking up
fucking
space?
believe that. And then this month they caught that thing that accelerated across the moon phase. if I had been looking through the telescope and had seen that,
The mothership's on the way back. It's
I
all going to
mean-
probe us.
Well,
It's
the
going to
thing is,
drop a
like,
cow on an Irish or English settlement.
that's what I'm saying.
kill someone with a sickle. My favorite part is the Pentagon's like, yeah, the mothership has just entered the solar system. I'm like, well, it's a pretty big fucking solar system. How far are we looking? Because this is
Yeah.
A
this is
while.
some
Like,
distance.
which end of it?
Not only that, but how far away how long is it going to take it to get here? That's my main concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I got my guns ready. I don't know if we can kill aliens with a shotgun.
And it's like
Gonna find out.
the mothership is like three Jupiters. Well, that sounds like Nibiru.
Stop it.
Here
Another-
we
We're
go.
not doing this Nibiru bullshit. It's not Nibiru, the end.
Cal did fall. I mean, in my mind,
I
this
do
is what
appreciate-
happened.
you know what? I was wondering where you were going to put this update at, and it makes sense. It's at the very end,
I
where
was
nobody
curious
wants to listen to it
How we're
anymore.
going to squeeze Nibiru into this, too.
Yeah, every chance I get.
Every episode, we're going to
As
have an
Nibiru
alien update.
squeezes
for this
into
year.
the solar system.
Hashtag that's not how gravity works. The end.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our updates. Do. That's a news update.
Oh, wow.
And then the tapping sounds.
Yeah.
That's me summoning the aliens to drop a cow on somebody.
No, this is my news update.
It's moose.
Welcome to the latest moves where cows are murderers.
How do you charge that? I don't know.
Failure to maintain.
Involuntary cow slaughter.
No. All right, bye everyone.
You believe in Nibiru.
Nibiru. Bye.
Later.
Maybe the gravity from Nibiru pulled the cow down the hill.
Do.